Welcome back to the Aligned Podcast, where we talk all things health, wealth, and relationships. I am your host, Molly Rubish, here with my co-host, Anna Goff, and today we have another really thoughtful and deep conversation, and it's around divorce, and is it okay? So, Anna, I want to ask you, and to get started, what kind of stigma and what kind of pressure did you feel around when you decided to get divorced, and how did that play into your choice?
Yeah, so obviously, divorce isn't something that you come to the conclusion quickly. It's something that maybe lingers in the back of your mind. You play out every scenario, and finally, whether there's an event that triggers it or you just decide, like, I can't do this anymore, and you move forward with it, it's something that you've thought about, right? It's not a decision that comes quickly. So when you start to tell your friends and family that you're getting divorced or that you're separated, it often is met with, I always say it's like, how is this going to affect me syndrome, right? Where they start asking
Oh,
all of
yeah.
these questions about, well, what was it and how bad was it? And then when you start to explain, and maybe you're trying to protect your partner, or your ex, by not divulging all of the dirty laundry, because that feels really icky. But then when they keep prying, but why? And you guys seem so happy, and have you thought about this? And what are you going to do? And you were a stay-at-home mom. How are you going to live? Like, are you going to lose the house? Are you going to keep the house? Like, they start asking all of these questions, and sometimes I think it's because they would wonder, like, what position would they be in if they were in your shoes. And then they think, okay, so how is this going to work now? Like, we all used to go to dinner together, or we were all friends. Like, now our relationship is going to change. Are you sure that you want to do this? Because this is really going to screw my life up, because I really liked going out on your boat with you, or going out, doing these things with you. And so I feel like for me, it was having to explain, but it felt awkward having to explain, because I didn't want to shed light on the reasons necessarily. But then they kept prying, and then they would say, some of my friends would say, God wants you to be married, and you made this commitment, and you need to stay in it no matter what, and aren't you going to do X, Y, and Z, and have you thought about this, and what is it going to do to your kids? So it's almost piling on the feelings and the emotions that you already have, that are so raw, and it's so painful. And it's very much like the grief of death, except no one's bringing you a casserole, no one's asking you how you're doing, no one's there to support you and to give you a hug and have you cry on their shoulder, unless you go to the friend that's been through a divorce, that understands actually how you're feeling. The other people are just projecting their ick onto you.
Yeah.
That was my experience with it.
Well, it's the grief of divorce without the support. Like, if somebody dies, people do come and they feel sad for you, and they want to know how they can help, and they check in. And then divorce does come with judgment, and it's everybody else's stuff. And so many women have said to me, is it bad enough? And sometimes they tell me some horrendous stories.
Right.
Horrendous stories. And they say, I just don't know if it's bad enough. Like it, and they try to minimize it, and it's through tears. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, it's bad enough. But at no point are we going to put our marriage on trial for everybody else to see. Only you know what it's like inside of those four walls with you and your spouse. Only you know what it's like. You know what kind of abuse, and it doesn't have to end in bruises. There's physical abuse, there's mental abuse, there's addiction. Unfortunately, there's sexual abuse within marriages. I have a couple women who have been forced to have intimacy with their husbands.
Yep.
There's people who are truly in like abused financially. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, there's infidelity, and there's infidelity on both sides. I'm not trying to say it's only men. that are doing this. There are some women that are having affairs, and it really does play out to nobody knows what's going on in your marriage. So when you go to the outside world and you go to your friends and you say, I'm getting a divorce, and they're like, why? Oh my gosh, what happened? It's like, well, how much time do you have? And it's really unfair to be able to say, and this is really just through my lens, and he has his own story too. And I've seen that so much in like some of my posts. The men are coming and saying, not exactly. That's not how it happened to me. That isn't what happened in my scenario. My wife didn't want to work on it. And it's giving me a lot of perspective that there really is two sides to every single story. There's two versions, and then there's kind of the truth. But we're only able to see it through the lens of what we endured.
Right.
And so it's essentially impossible to get approval from the masses. Your best friends hopefully got your back and they're going to support you. Your family, they're going to jump in to be mama bear and protect you. But then like Brian down the street and old co-worker Chuck, there's just no way that they're going to be able to fully understand unless you have let them in the entire journey.
Right.
And even then, it's their fears, their projections, their worry about their own marriage, their lens, how they were brought up, what religion they are. I had somebody reach out to me the other day that's in an arranged marriage. And she is well-versed, well-educated. She's got 2 master's degrees. She lives here in the United States, and she's in an arranged marriage. And I'm like, it's hard enough when we picked the person.
Right. Right. Maybe
I
somebody else would have done a better job. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. So it's like every single marriage has its own personality and has its own dynamics. And we have to do a better job of being compassionate as a society to know that most humans want to do the right thing. Most humans want to live their life and do the right thing. And they've already beat themselves up with the judgment. They've already beat themselves up about what the church would think, what their family will think, the vows that they took. They've already gone to therapy. They've cried. They've pleaded. They've tried. For the most part, we've already hurt ourselves far more than what anybody else would say. And then we have to open it up to the rest of the world, which is the super hard part.
Yeah, definitely. And to think, a lot of people have thought about this for years or decades, played it out in their mind, tried the repair. I know you and I talk to a lot of women who they go to their husband, they ask for repair or they ask to go to therapy or help. And then the women just figure, well, I'm just going to start working on myself. So they start reading, maybe they get a part-time job or start a little business. They start maybe going to Bible study or doing some sort of group with their friends, or they pour into their kids or whatever it might be. But it's like they're doing all of the things to grow and expand. And then it drives the couple even farther apart, because then she's like, okay, I can remember reading a book. I remember when Girl Wash Your Face was like so popular, Rachel Hollis and all of that. So like, I remember reading that book and feeling so empowered, like, oh my gosh, I can do anything. I'm going to like start a business. And she just started this amazing empire and I could do that. Like if she can do it, I can do it. And my ex got so mad because he was like, it's from that damn book you're reading, because it like threatened, and this was like a decade before we got divorced, right?
Yeah.
It threatened like the foundation of like, well, she stays home and everything's comfortable and all of that. Now all of a sudden she's getting like wild and, starting to think out of the box. And I think that can sometimes, if your partner doesn't grow with you, it can sometimes drive a wedge in the marriage too, like trying to fix things or fix yourself. And then it kind of drives you further apart sometimes.
And it's so difficult because, especially in the Midwest, which where you and I are
Hmm.
from,
Yeah.
we get married at such a young age. And it's, you know, my youngest son is going to turn 13 and he's like, I'm a teenager. It's like each chapter of your life you think, or my 18-year-old's like, I'm an adult. So you think you're old enough. You think that you have life figured out. But when you're in your early 20s or mid 20s, before you become a parent, before you um, have had big career change, before the death of a parent, before major grief, before maybe health scares, all of this stuff, before you've ever paid really big bills
Hmm.
and big pressures, you meet somebody and of course it's good. It's
Yeah.
good. You get to do what you want on the weekends, you get to sleep in, the workload in your apartment isn't like the workload of a big house. It's not like having kids, and financial stress isn't the same. Your careers aren't so big that you have travel and responsibilities.
Hmm.
So we decide really early on, yeah, I I love you. And I
Hmm.
think most of us go in it with the purest, truest intention of I absolutely love this person
Hmm.
through better or worse, good times and in bad, richer and poorer, like they're my person.
Hmm.
And it's unfair because it's like we haven't been able to pull back the curtain
Hmm.
and we don't know how ourselves will respond in those situations, and we don't know how our partner was going to respond in those situations. I have a few clients, and one in particular married somebody that then was an alcoholic.
Hmm.
And she was like, I just kept thinking, surely he's going to change. I'm going to grow up. Once we have kids, it will get better. Once he gets a better job, it will get better. Once we finally build the house and close on the house, it will get better. Once that bonus happens, we'll be able to pay that off. The
Hmm.
stressors will reduce. And so you count on your own lens. You count on your own expansion to be what's going to lift you. And then you think that your partner then is going to be lifted as well.
Hmm.
And the truth is, if they don't grow too, then
Hmm.
like you've said, you're sat with this really big gap between the two individuals.
Hmm.
And it is hard because you're like, but I made these vows. So now what?
Yeah. And you can love somebody and not want to be with them. You know, you can still have that admiration for someone, the love. You can still know that you made the right choice in that moment and then decide what was right for me at 25 maybe isn't right for me at 45, or right for my kids at 45, or right for the rest of my life, from then on. And I too have a client whose husband was an alcoholic, and they got together when they were teenagers, like 15. And he said to her, "Well, you knew that I like to drink." And she's like, "Yeah, when you were, you know, when everyone was partying in a
Yeah.
cornfield in the
Right.
90s, sure. But I thought
Yeah.
after kids and jobs and all of that, that she would
Mm-hmm.
grow up and grow out of that." And so through his lens, he's like, "Well, this wasn't false advertising. Like, this is who I am." And for her, she was like, "I just assumed you were going to grow up, and that we were going to grow together." And so, and we didn't know, like, you couldn't have asked him, "Are you going to change?" He wouldn't know, right? And
Right.
so we put these expectations that we're going to know, that we're going to look into a crystal ball and know that, yes, I'm going to be able to put up with anything that life throws my way, because we don't know. And so I think for people going into their second marriages, they're much more cautious or willing to really dive into those things. And
Yeah.
likely you're not going to change as much when you're in your 40s and 50s, maybe, as you did from your 20s to your 40s. Like, you went through some major life
Yeah.
events, kids,
Yeah.
jobs, all of those things, like
Yeah.
becoming an adult. And so now that you are an adult, you likely know who you are more
Uh-huh.
than when you were in your 20s.
Yeah. That's a really good point. So this is extremely controversial But like, is it okay to get divorced? Of course the answer is yes, because both of us are divorced. But at what point do we say, you know what's best for you? You know what is best for you in your marriage. And if you're this unhappy, likely your partner isn't happy in this marriage either. They may
Right.
want to stay in it because it's more convenient for money, for kids, because of the vows, but dynamic and energetically, you're not matched. So the question is, in a perfect world, and we could like just redefine marriage, it would say, why don't we all get married in our 40s? But of course, then our biological clock, and then you
Right.
have kids, you change because you have kids. So it's not even possible to say wait, because again, your growth. But think about birth to age 25.
Yeah.
How much happens in your life? I mean, every
Right.
single thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then look back at age 25 to 45 or 50, how
Yeah.
much growth has happened. So, to your point, it's like those are the years that our listeners are in, that our listeners are saying, oh my gosh, I have grown so far apart and I am crippled by the thought of leaving.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to share my kids? How am I going to divide up finances? How am I going to announce to the world that I'm a divorced woman or man? And it's, I'll just stay. So they keep going in the loop and the torture. And again, worried so much about what people are going to think.
Mm-hmm.
But we are all the sum of our lived experiences. And I love Michael Singer because he speaks so much about that. But you are the sum of every single day of your life, every relationship, every job, your kids, your parents, how you're brought up. And then I'm the same. And then our partners are the same. And so nobody has the exact same perspective as the next person. So it's impossible to say everybody should just think that it's okay that I get divorced,
Yeah.
or I should stay because everybody else wants me to. Really, the only person that gets to make this decision is yourself.
Right. Right.
And not even your mom or your best friend or your sibling has lived the same experience as you.
Right.
And so it's just it's like so much bigger than, is it bad enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a friend who was going through a divorce at the same time as me, and he was like, I feel like it should be like a lease where you re-up, every 5 or 10 years and decide, and you and I have talked about the podcast, The 10-Year Marriage, and, um, you know, I think there's some validity to it, right? Where, I mean, it definitely would shake up the way marriages go down, but I think for a couple reasons, right? If you have to prove to your partner that you're a worthy partner and you're like, like the time could be up and that they get to reporting on you and your behavior and how well you're doing at the marriage, right? And then the same token, you can say like, okay, this was great for a decade, and now I'm ready to move on. I mean, imagine if marriages were like that instead of forever. Uh, I don't know. I don't know if it would be better or worse, because there is, I was married for 18 years, so there are ups and downs, and there are times where there may be a year or two where you're like, ugh, this is awful, right? And then you get through that, and then you're like, okay, this is really great. And then it's awful and great and awful and great. And sometimes it's great for 5 years or more. And so there is something to be said for like, I'm going to stick it out with this person because we've made this commitment to each other. But then I think there are deal breakers, and then I think sometimes, it's when it really isn't healthy for you in your life, and you look and you're miserable, and you go, I've talked to people who are like, I would rather be dead than stay in this
Yeah.
marriage, and
Yeah.
and there might not be anything wrong, but you may feel like I'm just dead inside. I've completely lost who I am. We don't have a connection anymore. And surely there's something more than this.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm willing to be on my own and live in a one bedroom apartment versus this beautiful big home because I just can't stand to be with my partner anymore. Those are real things that people tell us and they are dealing with. And so, yeah, it is bad enough. If you're feeling like that and your life is just like counting down the days until you don't have to be with this miserable human again anymore, then yeah, it's worth it to go through the hell of divorce to get on the other
Yeah.
side.
I remember it was, I don't know, early, well, probably 2012, let's say. And I had a job that I had to get to the hospitals early in the morning, and the sun was just coming up, and things were really stressful in my first marriage, and my kids were young, and finances were so stressful. And my parents lived far away, and my mom was getting sick. And I mean, it was just like everything at the same time. And I remember looking at the sunrise, and I thought, well, the cool thing is life is impermanent and I won't live forever. So I have probably worst case scenario 60 more years. So it's just time. It's okay. I'm just going to watch the sunrise and it wasn't a really dark thought. It was more of this impermanence and I found comfort in the impermanence of it, knowing that like I won't have to do all the tasks forever. I don't have to clean the floors and take the kids to daycare and worry about my mom's illness and my marriage and the debt. And those are like these really big wake up calls because I was still so young, but I
Mm-hmm.
thought I had to have that job. I had to make that much money to be able to live the lifestyle that we had created that was stressful. I had to stay in this marriage because I took vows. I owe it to my kids to stay in this marriage. And so obviously we stayed in our marriage for much, much longer than that. And then eventually I ended up leaving my first marriage. But that thought is really real where you go, I find great comfort in the knowledge that this time on this earth is limited.
Yeah.
And now it's like almost on reverse.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, life is so impermanent that everybody around me that's judging me for what I did, or judging me for my career, or judging me for posting on social media, or
Right.
okay, it's
Yeah.
impermanent. I get to live
Right.
my life. I
Yeah.
get to live my life, and I have created one that I love with a partner that I love with lots of joy and excitement and it so really no matter who you are listening, you get to choose how this life goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's lots of rules and I know there's lots of stipulations and pressures, and I don't take those lightly and I don't take vows lightly. But we don't have to stay in a job, a friendship, a marriage, a family dynamic, even a conversation with someone that is disrespectful or that is like truly sucking the life out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't serve you. Yeah. I think it's so beautiful to be able to give yourself that gift too. To say, I want I love the litmus test of what would I want for my kids
Mm-hmm.
or would I want my daughter to be in a relationship like this? Because then I think it becomes very clear. And then you ask yourself, well, why do I want that for myself? And then do I want to show my kids that this is what you have to do because you've made a commitment, because you made a decision and signed a piece of paper that really didn't go through all the, the stipulations of your contract when you signed it. It was like, okay,
Yeah.
here you are on this day in this county in the United States, sign here, the end, right? And it's the most important financial contract. It's the contract of your life. Um, all of these things that you commit to somebody, and when you're in love, you can be like, oh yeah, it's great, we'll figure it out, right? But over a lifetime, we'll figure it out doesn't always work. And so I know for me, there was a point in my marriage where I said I would never want my daughter to be married to a man like you. And it was something that turned things around for my marriage at the time. And we lasted another almost 10 years.
Wow.
But it was that point of saying, I don't want this. And then when there was another um, situation where I felt like that, it was at a point where my kids were older and it really did matter more, you know? Um, and so I think that we need to give ourselves grace if we feel that, and we're allowed to change our minds and we're allowed to redefine what our life looks like. Because just because you made the decision to get married when you were young doesn't mean that you have to make the decision to be unhappy for the rest of your life, you know?
Right. And it's you did the best that you could with the information that you had at that time. So when we got married, we're like, yeah, this
Yeah.
this is going to be great.
Right.
And unfortunately, a whole lot of other variables happened.
Right.
And none of us, you contributed to your marriage, I contributed to my marriage. You know,
Yeah.
this is not about like, oh, it's only the male's fault. We
Right.
all are contributing to the success or failure of our relationship.
Yeah.
But I want all of us to like almost forgive the younger versions of ourselves that chose that partner in the first go round, because I know that we did so with the purest, truest intention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, isn't that just okay? Like, isn't
Right.
it okay that we can say, I'm so thankful for this chapter and the growth, and we did have love. Like, I like this, the quote of, it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all. Like, you did
Yeah.
have love, you did have joy, you did get to walk down that aisle and say I do. You potentially had children or dogs or a
Yeah.
beautiful life with your in-laws, or you created something really meaningful, whether it was for a short amount of time or 50 years. It still is significant because it's a big chapter in your book.
Yeah.
um, and so we just all need to give each other and ourselves a whole lot more grace, that it is okay.
Hmm.
I personally believe, and I know not everybody
Yeah.
that ever listens to this podcast will believe that, but I personally believe that it's okay to pivot in your life.
Hmm.
And it doesn't come without a heavy heart or really big decisions and consequences, but it is okay to decide what is best for you for the next half of your life.
Absolutely. And you don't have to burn it all down and throw the other person under the bus and hate them and wait until something catastrophic happens and then tell all your friends how horrible they are. It's
Right.
okay to still care and love that person and not want to be with them and want to protect them and want to raise children together in a way that is productive and
Yeah.
collaborative and all of that, and not want to be married to them. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good point. We don't have to make divorce so aggressive and so me versus you and in that energy. It can be like, okay, we're going to lovingly support our children and we're going to break up. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be throw everybody under the bus and ask our kids to not like that, their dad, and, you know, tell everybody what he did. I
Hmm.
mean, we can be better than that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it requires a lot of putting your ego to the side and
For sure.
being the bigger person because there's rejection and
Mm-hmm.
humiliation and all of the feelings that come along with divorce, especially if you're not the one to initiate it. But I would challenge everyone who is in this situation, who might be contemplating divorce or going through a divorce, on both sides, to really find the best parts that you fell in love with and focus on those with that person and think of them in a loving light that you once had, because that's the way your kids look at that person, and really know that even if you were hurt, even if you feel scorned and wronged and how could, betrayed, whatever it is, that you have potentially kids that love their mom or dad more than anyone else in the world. They don't want
Yeah.
their parents to fight. Focus on that. Focus on the good. Try to do what's best for each other, even when you're going through this terrible divorce. Don't listen to your attorneys always, and we're gonna fight to the bitter end and be, have
Right.
a bloodbath. Because that's what everyone tells you, and I would challenge everyone to try, if they can, to move through it in a loving way.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up today's episode, and thank you guys for being here as we are growing and expanding. We ask that you like, rate, comment, and ultimately share so we can get this podcast to more people who need to hear it. And we will see you next time on the Aligned Podcast.